All right, if we are ready to go, I'm ready.
We're
Okay.
ready. Thank you.
Very good. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I would like to call this meeting to order, the March 24, 2021 San Francisco Airport Community Roundtable Technical Working Group Subcommittee meeting at 12:03 p.m. We are meeting via Zoom teleconference pursuant to the shelter-in-place order issued by the San Mateo County Health Officer, the Governor's Office, and the CDC social distancing guidelines, which discourage public gatherings. Please note that we will be recording this meeting, and the recording will be available on the Roundtable website in a few days. At this point, Angela will explain how the public can participate in today's meeting.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to unshare that for 1 second. I couldn't pull up my script at the same time, but thank you, Sam, Hindi, and I just want to note that Ricardo Ortiz has joined our meeting, so welcome, Ricardo. And for those attending the Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general public comments period, we will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to raise their hand by using the raise hand feature. And for those calling by phone, you may press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute your microphone and you may begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes. Please note that members of the public must wait for my prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raise hand function. For example, you cannot raise your hand in the beginning of the meeting if you wish to speak on an item later in the meeting. Any written comments that were submitted in advance will be read by staff during discussion of each appropriate agenda item. Thank you.
Vice Chair Hindi, do you want to continue or you want me to take over?
Please, Mr. Chair, go right ahead. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for opening for me. I was having a little technical difficulty here. So with that, we will move on to item number 2, which it would be public comment. This is for comment for items that are not on the agenda. So we ask that you
apologize for interrupting. We are still on item 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Thank
thought we
you.
called the meeting to order already. Oh, I'm reading. Okay. So let me go back to that. Hang on just a second. Michelle, I have item number 1 is calling the meeting to order. I thought we did that. So, or do we?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to recognize the members that were present, but I apologize if we wanted to move on.
No, I'm fine with members who are present, who I see are obviously the Vice Chair, Sam Hindi, who opened the meeting. Do we have any other members of the roundtable that are present? And then with that, then we can go to the members of,
I'm
sorry, Chair.
Terry O'Connell and Schneider.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so I have member O'Connell and member Schneider from Millbrae. And we also have Kathleen Wentworth from the Jackie Spears office. We have from the FAA, I'm going to try to list them here. I have Joseph Burt. I have, I saw Fabiola Garcia. Hi, Fabi. And then from SFO, we have Bert Ganag, and we have also Paul Hanna. And then who am I missing? We have from Supervisor Dave Pine, we have Linda Woolman. Thank you, Linda. And who am I missing?
Through the chair.
Yes.
We also have Doug Yakel from SFO, but he's under the attendees column.
Okay, welcome, Doug. Glad to have you. And please let me know if I'm missing anybody else. And if I am not, then we can move on to item number 2. Are we good?
Mr. Chair, we have Eric Tanberg with the FAA as well.
Okay, thank you, Bert. And welcome, Mr. Tanberg. Glad to have you. And with that, then we will move on. Michelle, are we ready to move on to item number 2 then? Okay, I'll take that to be
Yes, thank
yes.
you.
Okay, good. Item number 2 then is public comment, and this is for items that are not on the agenda. So we will open it up. As Angela, do we have anybody wishing to speak? Angela, can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I do have 3 hands raised at the moment, and I will first call on Jennifer L., followed by Darlene Yapley. And if I can please remind all members of the public to please state the city they're calling from. So Jennifer, please accept this request to unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Landesman from Palo Alto. I'm a resident of Palo Alto. And I am here to address the issue, the ongoing issue that I personally have, but many of my neighbors have, which is that we do not have representation on aviation issues. The Santa Cruz Roundtable was abruptly suspended, all of the activities. Therefore, all of the work that went into that for the last year and a half has gone nowhere. The FAA ombudsman does not respond to the public. They only work with officials, but we have no officials that are currently charged to address our concerns. There is an issue regarding complaints that's happening, but the bottom line is that the public is asked for many inputs and it's engaged to provide input, but there's no two-way accountability. Basically, there's no accountability to the public that is being impacted by NextGen in my area. And I'm very concerned about the lack of noise information that is given to the public. There's no transparency. There's no notification. The situation with the GBAS cadex is really unacceptable. Of course, I have no voice, but I find it shocking that even the SFO Roundtable does not bother to look at any changes in the contours that could happen from GBAS, not even out of curiosity. So this is an untenable situation. And I think it's very inappropriate to have these meetings where you are leaving the public that stands to be affected out of the discussion without appropriate projections of what any changes that you discuss are. And that is on the airports, on the FAA, and as I mentioned, we have no representation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Landesman. I will now call on Darlene Yapley, followed by Rob Holbrook. Ms. Yapley, please accept this request to unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
At the October 7th SFO Roundtable meeting, I highlighted 2 arrival items on the IFP gateway from HMMH's chart. I asked that the TWG cover these topics and get answers from the FAA. Will they impact Bay Area cities? We need to know what they are, and likely they are CADEX, so no further public notification will be done. Point raised 3, arrival to SFO, is the first one. Is this related to Bodega? What is changing, especially around Woodside and after Woodside? Number 2, Star Bricks RNAV 3 to San Jose. Although this is a San Jose arrival, it impacts the surfer arrival to SFO, and there is a dependency. This means potential noise impacts to the community under the SFO arrival of surfer. Note, the Big Sur overlay is under development as the surfer replacement. The Big Sur overlay is not on the IFP gateway. The BRICS comment period ends on April 12th, 2021, which is less than 30 days away. It's surprising to see the FAA post BRICS changes, given that the FAA commented multiple times over the years that BRICS changes would not occur until the surfer replacement would be finalized because of the interdependency between BRICS and surfer. To the best of our knowledge, the Big Sur overlay has not been finalized. We need information from the FAA on BRICS 3 changes related to the proposed BSR overlay. The FAA has committed to a robust and transparent community engagement process and has reiterated they will not shift noise without community engagement. Despite these claims, the FAA continues to pursue such changes as this Point Raised 3 and BRICS 3 without informing and consulting with potentially impacted communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yapley. I will now call on Ms. Rob Holbrook. Please accept this request to unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
Got it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Robert Holbrook. I live in Mountain View, and I would be represented by the Santa Clara, Santa Cruz Airport Communities Roundtable, but it's been suspended, as was previously noted. I've been, as I think a lot of us have been, very interested in the results that the FAA published about the Neighborhood Environmental Survey in January. And I thought I would share with you the way that I am framing this for myself. For 40 plus years, the FAA has used the DNL 65 standard, which correlates to a highly annoyed level of 12.3% of residents for making decisions about providing residents with sound insulation, subsidized sound insulation. What we've now learned is that that 12.3% annoyance level is not at DNL 65, not at DNL 60, not at DNL 55, not at DNL 50, but out beyond the DNL 50 corridor somewhere. At DNL 50, almost 20% of residents in the survey stated that they were highly annoyed. Nobody's expecting the FAA to provide sound insulation all the way out to Palo Alto. At least I'm not. But I think this reframes in a very important way the with data the annoyance that exists in the community far from the airport with respect to airplane noise. I hope this reframing is helpful to you in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holbrook. And with that, Chairman Ortiz, we do not have any more hands raised.
And we don't have any written comments either.
We do not.
Okay, so with that, I will move on to item number 3, which is our work plan goal 1, review and comment on aircraft procedures. This is a discussion with the goal to give direction to staff consultants on our next step and priorities. In the 4-year strategic plan, the membership identified 3 aircraft procedures to focus on: FAA night and hush departures, nighttime arrivals on runway 28R and 28L, redirect southern arrivals, surfer and pirate start airspace arrival. So we're going to spend 40 minutes on this item just to give adequate time for feedback and direction. We're going to ask Justin to start with the background on night hush departures and the nighttime arrivals on runway 28R and 28L, and to discuss these priorities and direction to staff. If we have any additional time, we'll go on to the other procedures, if not at another working group. So with that, I will pass it on to Justin. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, great. All right. So what I'm going to be talking about today are a little bit of history first on the Select Committee on South Bay Arrivals, some timeline to get everyone up to speed from the Select Committee up until today on these procedures, and really dive into the procedures that are listed within the work plan goal number 1. So with that, the history here for those that are new, the Select Committee was formed in 2016 at the urging of congressional reps to address FAA implementation of Metroplex. It was comprised of 12 local elected officials with 12 alternates representing Santa Cruz, Santa Clara, and San Mateo counties. The meetings were for about 6 months, and there were more than almost 24 meetings. And it led the public coordination aspect of the FAA's Phase 1 report. They reviewed FAA proposals with a focus on arrival issues that primarily impact the South Bay region. And specifically, the SFO Roundtable was tasked with accepting public input and reviewing FAA proposals with a focus on SFO departures and arrivals near the airport. And responses to the FAA's Phase 1 report were issued on November 17, 2016. the overall conclusion, or I would say recommendations, if you had to summarize them, fly at higher altitudes, fly over locations with fewer people, avoid noisy flight maneuvers, implement noise reducing retrofits where possible, and reducing noise at night was reported as an urgent priority. So here's a little bit of a timeline here that I provided that I think would be helpful. In November 2015, FAA initiative to address noise concerns, three-phase approach was provided. The formation of the Select Committee on South Bay Arrivals was April 2016. And then in May of 2016, the FAA NorCal Initiative Phase 1 report was released. In response to that, the Select Committee and SFO Roundtable issued reports in around November 2016. And in July 2017, the FAA provided a Phase 2 report. Subsequent to that, they actually provided two updates. One update in November 2017, which provided additional information that they hadn't, I believe, had gotten to, given the extensive nature of some of the recommendations and the quantity of material. And then the further update in April 2018. The SFO Roundtable actually then had multiple, I think a total of 7 working group meetings. The first 5 were actually on going through all the responses, and we categorized those based off of departures and arrivals and nighttime issues. And we were hoping to not only go through the responses, but actually come up with next steps and priorities that would influence the work plan. So with that, we provided a summary of all of those meetings in the 6th technical working group. And eventually this is what led to some of these items that we're discussing today that are part of the work plan. In December of 2018, the night hush procedures, the FAA provided a steps forward presentation to the roundtable. And Jackie Spears' office had a letter to the FAA on night hush specifically in March 2019. And then in July 2020, we also had a follow-on procedure briefing from the FAA on night hush, which I will get into when I speak about night hush. So just to recap, work plan goal number 1 for the roundtable for 2020-2021 is review and comment on aircraft procedures. And specifically, it's to look at the modified FAA proposal for night hush, nighttime departures, options for nighttime arrivals on runways 28 left and right, and options for a redirect of southern arrivals on the Surfer and Pirate flight procedures. So today I hope to cover the first 2, given the amount of material, and get feedback and direction on the next steps and prioritization that we want to take. So I'll first cover night hush. I'll provide a history and current status of where we are today. So the Select Committee had the following recommendations that I think are relate to the night hush. So create a new south transition for the night departure procedure and expand nighttime hours to 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Currently, the night procedure, which you could see in this graphic, hopefully the graphic everyone could see, the night procedure going up to the night waypoint is used from midnight to 6 a.m. And that's predominantly used, especially in any departures going east, and nighttime operations head to the south use the stick procedure out of SFO, which turn and go over land and then head on south. The roundtable's recommendations, there were many, One was to implement a south transition to the night hush departure in place of the stick and oak candle southbound departure. So essentially, what does that mean? That means that the aircraft would go up tonight, stay over water, go across the Golden Gate Bridge, and head out towards the Gobbs waypoint before going to their south or southeast destination. 100% of the flights to the north, east, south, west, flying the night hush departures to the final fix on the departure. So what that really means is the Roundtable was saying, please don't turn early. You know, if you're going to a fixed or a waypoint such as night or Hobbs or Gobbs, don't turn early. And maximize the use of this night procedure, you know, 100% usage between midnight and 6 a.m. And look at other hours, nighttime hours, which would be typical of CNEL metric, which is 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then lastly, basically the recommendation was to the FAA to consider, you know, using vectoring in place of a new procedure or transition until that can be established. So until in the meantime, consider using vectoring as a way of flying over water, over the ocean. So the FAA's response to the recommendations. Overall, there were some feasible options there that they said that they would consider. The volume of aircraft operations from SFO in Oakland were a major factor in determining the usable hours. As presented by them in their last presentation, and their recommendation or proposal was the use between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. Where operations do not exceed a 30 per hour limit. And they noted that usable hours would not change with additional waypoints south of Gobbs or a new departure procedure like night hush. So if an alternative recommendation to the Roundtable was let's create a new departure procedure or new waypoints within this, it wouldn't still change the fact that there's congestion and different things that are limiting those hours of use, is how I take that. And finally, early on in one of the earlier presentations from Night Hush was, you know, that the FAA stated they will not move forward unless the issues of congestion, noise shifting, and increased flying distance are addressed. The night hush procedures currently contain a transition from the night waypoint to the Gobbs waypoint, as you could see in this image to the right that I took from the FAA presentation. The FAA proposes to utilize this Gobbs transition for southbound aircraft, except for any aircraft that require the 28 runways as a departure. Using Gobbs for nighttime operations can be implemented in a much shorter time frame. And this is because the transition already exists and a new, you know, there wouldn't have to be a development of a new procedure that would have to go through a formal and more lengthy process. And then once aircraft are headed from night to Gobbs, they will rejoin their route once over the ocean and transition from nights to Gobbs by proceeding to waypoints to the south. And you could see this in the purple here, which is basically vectoring off of this to their destinations and picking it up at a different waypoint. And it's worth noting that aircraft, the FAA stated aircraft over the Golden Gate would be between 10,000 to 15,000 feet AGL.
And Justin, just for comparison purposes, the 10,000 to 15,000 feet compared to how high are they when they're flying over San Francisco when they're doing stick today?
That's a great question. I forget offhand. We did talk about that before. I don't know, Bert, do you, if you're on
out of SFO,
roughly?
Out of
Yeah, on the
SFO,
stick,
we're
maybe.
looking
Yeah.
at about 3,000 to 4,000. Out of Oakland, we're looking at 5 to 7, maybe 8.
Yep.
So when they're flying, and I'm just picturing when they make that turn to the west over the stick, and they're flying over highly populated areas of San Francisco. You're telling me that that point, right in that, right where right there, they're flying at 6,000 feet.
4 to 6, some 3,500.
Okay, so we're comparing 4 to 6 over highly populated areas to 10,000 to 15,000 over the Golden Gate Bridge is what we're comparing. And the only reason I bring that up is for the noise shifting concern that I just want to address. Thank you, Justin.
Yep, you're welcome. Good comment. Lastly, the FAA stated public comments could be submitted to the roundtable regarding night hush. The environmental review process is being conducted. This is our last update that I believe we received. And once the environmental review is complete, the FAA or the roundtable would coordinate with the FAA to determine the next steps. I put together some possible recommended next steps. Obviously, this is for discussion and what we're here today to really discuss. I'll briefly go over this for night hush, and then I'll go to runways 28 left and right, and then we could open it up at that point. But I believe there's two real, issues here. One is the nighttime hours. The SFO recommendation roundtable was 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. FAA's proposal was 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. One of the recommended next steps could be to accept the 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. And at that point, analyze some data as it's implemented and maybe even currently from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. To look at the operations, look at how much congestion and traffic are going there, and seeing if there are ways potentially that those hours can be expanded upon. And then the next possible discussion point, I think, would be the Gobbs waypoint. What happens before as you approach the Gobbs waypoint, and what happens after, as you stated, Ricardo, was, what is the altitude at which they would cross over land if they turn and vector early before the Gobbs waypoint. Part of this would be you could accept the FAA proposal, which is to allow aircraft to turn and rejoin their route once over the ocean on the transition point. Or you could also do some analysis of track and altitude data, conduct some noise modeling to compare and look at ways that maybe you could make some adjustments that would further benefit the communities, especially as aircraft turn and they aren't staying over the ocean, I should say, and turn over land.
Justin, if there's 10 to 15,000 over the Golden Gate, I'm assuming when they get to Gobbs, they're a bit higher than that?
Yeah, and definitely, even if I think what would be nice to know is at the earliest point that the FAA thinks that they would turn off of while they're heading to Gobbs. I should pull up that image again. As they're heading to Gobbs, when they turn before, what do they think is the earliest point of the turn that possibly, whether it's this point right here, what is the altitude there at that point? What could be the range of altitude, and what would the noise level, what would that actually look like on the ground? I think would be good to know.
Yeah, and again, the real question there is why can't we just stay over the ocean? So I think we should talk about that.
Exactly. Yes, that's definitely. Okay, I'm going to move on to runways 28 left and right. The select committee recommendations were the FAA ATC should make every effort to direct arrivals into a single stream to runway 28 right during nighttime hours, and midnight to 6 a.m. is cited. The FAA to determine feasibility of increasing the glide slopes to both runways to maximize extent of noise mitigation with safety. FAA consider all feasible measures to reduce noise to bayside communities by directing traffic to runway 28 when possible. So to, provide that single stream to runway 28 right would push aircraft further from those bayside communities, which would reduce noise. Okay, that's the overall recommendation there. And the roundtable had similar overarching recommendations. Use a single stream of traffic to approach 28 right when landing to the west. And they also had a recommendation of possibly using offset approaches to runway 28 right only when weather permits and when landing to the west. The FAA's response was the single stream of arrivals to runway 28 right is in use per published procedures during the day and night operations and is used as much as operationally feasible. So they stated that NCT or Northern California TRACON will continue to reinforce the use of this standard operating procedure to personnel through training and briefings. And they did note too, and I think it's worth noting because of the current situation that we're in, is that reduction in SFO arrivals and departures may increase usage of that single stream to runway 28 right.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding that one. So we're reducing arrivals and departures. How is that going to increase usage? I'm missing something.
I think it has to do with the sequencing and just the flow going in and getting everybody in. And when you have people coming from different destinations, lining up, queuing up for both runways, when operations are down or less, and this is, usually at night, but in times like these where operations are less in general, there could be opportunities to sequence and get everyone to use runway 28 right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep. No problem. No problem. Okay. So some possible recommended next steps to consider would be to monitor and report runway use. And the SFO ANAO does this as part of their noise system and reporting, currently looking at, runway use. And I think it would be worth analyzing some data to determine when a single stream to runway 28 right was not used. If a single stream to runway 28 could have been used during those times, and just really looking at the data and possibly meeting with NCT to discuss the use of a single stream, reinforce the standard operating procedure that's in place, educate the controllers on the importance of using that single stream, I think would be important in discussions with the FAA, and analyze future data to determine if a use of a single stream is increased, sustained, or further increased. So really just monitoring trends in compliance and reinforcement to FAA and NCT on its importance and its use. But I think that my recommendation would be that you really need to understand the data of how things are going currently, while you do this.
And should we add a point to this that is how GBAS is going to impact the 28 LNR? Yes,
absolutely. I think that's part of it that could be discussed with the GBAS team. What is their consideration in runways 28 left and right? Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you,
and so with that, I think that covers my, thank you, Michelle. So I think I'll hand it off to you, Michelle.
Right,
if you
thank
wanna.
you.
Or Mr. Chair. Yep.
So now, do we have any questions or comments from the members? And if you don't mind, let me make a comment about night hush, because it just so what we're saying, and correct me if I'm mistaken, Justin, is we have planes taking off of runway 1, making a sharp left turn right over highly populated areas. And what we're saying is we would like to let those planes go north and make a turn over the water at a point where they've reached a much higher altitude, and then out to the ocean and then head south. Then when they head south, we're asking that they stay over the ocean versus going back over the peninsula. So those were our two asks. And again, it was from midnight to 6 that we had asked. And when you have a plane flying over your house at 4,000 feet at midnight, or from midnight to 1 a.m., you would understand why that is important. I think that we have the opportunity to make an impact on a lot of lives in San Francisco. So this is a very important item. And so I think we do need to pursue this. So any other members have questions?
And also, Chair, with Kathleen Wentworth being here, I also think that she led a discussion on this topic at the last meeting that we'll want to get her feedback as well.
Yes, please. Kathleen, could you give us your wisdom, please?
I'd be happy to, such as it is. Thank you. I think that you guys covered all the salient points, and I think, Ricardo, you did a good synopsis of what our options are, what benefit would inure to the close-in the residents. I think what's important to realize is that this proposal, looking at this magenta, is the FAA's idea of where the airplanes would fly and where they would turn them. I think it's important to recognize that the Roundtable had a much better recommendation, and that was that they go out to Gobs and then they turn south, and they don't go overland until they're at a high enough altitude, whatever that might be determined to be. Having them be able to turn 6 miles before Gobs is a recipe for some lack of specificity. And I think we're going to find that human beings, being what they are not going to wait until exactly 6 miles before Gobs before giving them a turn. And that we're going to see something less than perfect adherence to this. And I think we're just going to be chasing our tails on that for years to come, if that's what winds up being the option. So I would think that there might be good consideration given to reiterating to the FAA the Roundtable's position on this and the Roundtable's recommendation. And that does not include a turn 6 miles before Gobs without some extremely tight recommendations on how to keep that safe from noise from other people. And we've never yet heard from the FAA, I don't believe, a reason, a technical reason why we cannot go out to Gobs and go south and stay over the ocean until we have the airplanes high enough. Now, there are practical reasons, and I respect the airline's need to want to conserve fuel and time on flights. But there's not that many airplanes we're talking about that are going to be doing this on a nightly basis. And I think it's important that we keep those airplanes over the ocean southbound until they're at a high enough altitude. How you go about communicating that with the FAA is a challenge. I think it's also going to be difficult, swapping gears a little bit to the hours of operation. If we are restricting the southbound to 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., of course, that's not very many flights southbound, but it would be some help. We have to recognize that the other residents of the Bay Area, those living in the East Bay and the Northeast Bay, will be continuing to have the benefit of the night departure and the noise abatement procedure it provides for their full time from midnight to 6 a.m. And that disparity might not be well received by our residents, being restricted to less generous hours of nighttime noise abatement procedures. So that's something to keep in mind. And I just don't know how to suggest how you deal with the FAA, because they have a set procedure. They have worked on this in their little enclave of private meetings that take place as a typical part of their procedure design. I understand why they restrict that to people, to non-public, but I think times are changing, and I think the public needs to have some input into procedure design before it gets to the point where we are presented with a fait accompli. And that seems to be kind of what I perceive is happening here. Yeah. So I'm happy to answer questions. I think it's important. I think the FAA has a completed procedure done, and I don't know that we can move them off that position. And I don't exactly know how you want to proceed. So I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
So Kathleen, I have a question on, on GOBS, that turn, there's two things that are right there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So two things. First is where the turn begins, which is the 6 miles before GOBS, but also is the direction once the turn is complete, what that direction is. Because if you make it really tight, then you could be right over Pacific at a pretty low altitude versus making it a little wider and be just wait till you're down. I don't know what that little point, that's Pigeon Point, I guess, is. If you were right at the point right there, then you would have gained a lot more altitude and the noise impact would be a lot less.
Your observations are absolutely accurate. It depends on when the controller gives the instruction for the turn, how quickly the pilots respond, and how aggressively they make the turn. You can make an aggressive turn if you're flying boxes and cargo maybe, but most passenger pilots would make a less aggressive turn. But I also think we need to be cognizant of the fact that controllers are professionals. They do an amazing job in the Bay Area traffic, which is just a challenge I could not even imagine. Having said that, they are used to using vectors in a very liberal manner in the Bay Area. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes vectors can be good for even residents. But when you're vectoring an aircraft off of an established procedure on a regular basis, as I've observed them to do by watching the traffic regularly, I think it's going to be important to make sure that there are safeguards built in so that these turns don't happen any sooner than they have indicated they would. And since I don't see that we're able to control their vectoring on many other procedures in the Bay Area, I have questions on how this would be structured in such a way as to constrain flexibility that's not necessary at 2 in the morning. We haven't talked, we have so many questions to ask the FAA, I can't even begin to start thinking about them. You know, not only the altitudes are going to be there, but the airspeeds, are they going to accelerate and be going 350 knots, you know, right at, 10,500 feet as soon as they hit that and making more noise than necessary at full throttle. There's just a lot of the questions that I think we need to ask. And we made a good start on it back at the July meeting. And we had a detailed list, and the FAA was very, very good at responding to those lists we provide, the questions we provided them in late June for the July meeting.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think there's a potential for lots and lots and lots of detailed questions to see what we can do to work with them or to have them work with us on what we might want to see.
Right. Okay, do we have any roundtable members that have questions for Kathleen or for Justin?
Chair Ortiz, I take it you can't see the participant list. This is Ann Schneider.
Oh, do you have your hand raised, Ann?
I do, and it's okay. I have a question for Kathleen and then a couple for Justin.
Right.
Kathleen, you made a reference that if we were successful in reducing, let me rephrase. You talked about how the East Bay might be getting the benefit, and our residents may not see that. This is not a night hush issue, but on top of this particular photograph showing the overflights, we are also subjected to the overflights from Oakland.
Yes.
And maybe that's something to add to a future work plan, because to me, it's funny which of our neighborhoods get the loudest of those overflights. And to me, it's along our neighborhoods along 280. I can't speak for Burlingame or Hillsborough, but the planes seem to turn over Brisbane, fly over South City, and then down our spine on there. And they're pretty loud. So I think that that is just one more additional input on that. And I'd love to see it come back for our work plan, which we're going to review, Michelle, what, in a couple of months? Maybe we need to be talking more with Oakland's Roundtable. And maybe there's some way to reduce that additional input.
Okay, so this specific discussion is specifically
To night hush.
To night hush, and
Right.
the changes that we proposed, and so let's. I want to try to.
I know. I just want to go back to Kathleen's comment that I agree, and that this is our time to also be communicating with Oakland and their input to the FAA on changes. My other question then goes back to Justin. When we look at the noise reports from SFO, and when we get the verbal report, they keep saying that passenger counts are way down, but that is not the same thing as the total number of airplanes arriving and departing are down that same percentage. And I've been meaning to bring that up at the full roundtable, that we need to be clear on these different data points. And if there is a current shift right now, so your comment, Justin, was, well, right now with COVID reduced planes, that means that we can use runway 28 right more frequently. That may be true. That may not be true, because we're talking about passengers versus numbers of flights. And I don't have that data at my fingertips. So I just think we need to be specific on that. And then on top of it, if we're looking at the impact of people's ability to sleep, we've got flights that are getting people to airports around the world that have curfews, or flights that are getting them back to the East Coast on the red-eye flights. And then we've got cargo flights. And I am having a hard time wondering why all of our residents in the Bay Area need to be kept up at night so that Amazon can deliver a package in 24 hours. I'm a little bit more open to getting people. I am a whole lot less open to not being able to sleep all night because cargo flights are coming in. So I'd love to see us divide cargo from passenger flights, even understanding right now that a lot of the passenger flights that are flying with fewer passengers are filling up with cargo. I think we need to be a lot more careful with our data on that. So those are just my comments on your presentation. It goes along with the 24/7, 365 averaging. If we're really eventually going to break down with those metrics and how they're counting annoyance, then we need to be more specific.
So I'm sorry, Member Schneider, let me I just, the whole point of this agenda item is to give direction to staff on how to move forward with these two very specific items. So, and we do have limited amount of time. So if we could.
I understand, but I'm sorry, Chair Ortiz, every gosh darn flight in and out of San Francisco keeps me awake at night.
I
So
understand
these additional data points, we need to be specific, and the FAA needs to understand that we are not stupid, and we understand the difference between passenger and cargo and what is really coming in and out of the airports in our Metroplex. And then I'm done.
Okay, and I see Member Hindi has, our the Chair Hindi has his hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not have questions. Is it appropriate to make two quick comments?
Please, yes, let's do that. I think we need to wrap this up.
Very good, thank you. I just want to thank Justin for his thorough presentation, and I'm in total agreement with the recommendation that he has submitted. And I couldn't agree more with Kathleen and you, Mr. Chair, as far as, where do you turn before gobs and at what elevation and what kind of speed, because let's not forget the reason the select committee did recommend this procedure or this night hush is really to lessen the noise or eliminate the noise over the residential areas. If we're gonna come back up tonight and turn before gobs and end up with the same thing, then what's the point? And I could tell you from personal experience, just because something is, and I'm very concerned about the vagueness that Kathleen has pointed out. And even because just because it is in the SOP, it does not really mean that it's being followed. So you cannot leave it open-ended like this, and we have to push the FAA to make sure we get firm where they turn. And quite frankly, while I appreciate the FAA's concern about fuel burn and CO2, I think the 6 miles difference when you turn before gobs is really negligible in the scheme of things if we could get our residents time to sleep. And we're talking about nighttime here. So it's critical not to really be muddled with the environmental on 6 mile burn rate or CO2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. Any other members that have any questions or comments so we can try to wrap this item up? And I don't see any other raised hands, so I'm going to bring it back to Michelle. Do you have enough to go on, or do you want us to give you some more specific?
No, I think we absolutely do. And I think the direction is that you're in support of the recommendations. However, we need additional information. So we're going to work with Kathleen on getting some more detailed questions answered from the FAA. And we clearly understand that we need to have broken out data more clearly. So yes, we do. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we're pretty clear that we would like our original recommendations to be acted on. We will take something that's short of that, but not happily. I think again, we're talking about helping a lot of people be able to sleep at night, and I'm very, very comfortable that that's the right thing to do. Do we open it to members of the public right now for comment?
The agenda.
Or are we going to wait till the end?
The
okay,
agenda.
So with that,
sorry, the agenda says you can wait to the end of all the agenda items.
Perfect. So in the interest of time, I'm going to do just that. We're going to wait till the end and do public comment at the end. So with that, we are going to move to item number 4, which is the update on ground-based augmentation system, the GBAS, including the timeline update status and NEPA CEQA considerations. Included in the packet is the SFO presentation from November 19, 2020, where we heard presentation and the technical working group committee asked for additional information. Specifically, what we asked for was to provide the CNEL cumulative noise decibel levels for areas on the maps presented that showed areas in purple titled noise expansion areas. And that was, I believe it was like the far away from us, but, and it provides CNEL cumulative noise decibel levels for new initial and intermediate airplane approaches with increased slopes and altitudes, including information on the location of airplane air brakes deployment locations. Thirdly, timeline showing SFO submitting concept to FAA in March. What is the status of the submittal? So with that, we will turn it over to Paul Hanna, a technical consultant with SFO, to update the subcommittee on the response to these questions. We have set aside 15 to 20 minutes for this presentation, Mr. Hanna, so you can take it now.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to introduce both Paul Hanna and Joseph Burt. Paul Hanna is one of our consultants, and Joseph Burt is with the Federal Aviation Administration.
Thank you, Burt. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So let me share my screen. Everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So today we're going to go over GBAS procedures from the FAA side, and then a little bit of the environmental review, since I know there were questions at the last roundtable on the environmental review process for these GBAS overlays. So currently the GBAS is being implemented as a non-federal airspace navigation aid. In other words, that means it's not being sponsored by the FAA. In other words, the airport, public, city, public, somebody from the public can buy it, have it installed The only exception to that is we have the right to approve or disapprove the implementation. With that, so the FAA's perspective, basically, the current overlays that are going in now will be basically redundant for ILS approaches. So if the ILS is unavailable at some point, it'll offer a redundancy or a backup for that. The other thing we want to stress is while GBAS may enable, when we get to the innovative approaches, it may enable steeper approaches or steeper angles, but there's no proven concept right now that would increase noise or decrease. So we just want it to be known that it may actually increase in some situations. We're currently researching in this area and are assessing opportunities to address the noise abatement stuff. As far as the environmental review process goes, so currently the proposed GBAS are overlays, which that means they are both vertically and laterally the same as the current RNAV procedures into San Francisco. So they are not going to change how aircraft fly today. So how they're flying today will be how they will fly when they do these GLS approaches. The current environmental review for the GLS or the GBAS overlays is ongoing, and we're hoping to have that wrapped up and completed by the end of May. Right now, the schedule shows that these are scheduled to be implemented on December 2nd, 2021. That's as of right now. That could always change and slide. I recommend that continue monitoring the gateway, and if they slide or anything, we'll make sure that you guys know here at the roundtable. We are not anticipating any public comments reference these overlays because, again, they are exact overlays of the RNAV procedures. Kind of going into our environmental process. So we basically follow NEPA. NEPA basically requires us to look at noise, social economics, land use, air quality, among other impacts. If an action is not subject to NEPA, then we don't do any environmental action whatsoever. NEPA can be different depending on what the context or the procedure or what it is that we're actually doing. There are currently 3 levels that we use for our NEPA review. You have the CADEX, which has been mentioned earlier on in this meeting today. You have an environmental assessment, and then you have an EIS. So a CADEX is obviously the lower of the environmental reviews. The environmental assessment is a little bit more in depth, and it looks at potential, cause of significant environmental effects. So that's what that is. And then the environmental impact statement, that's the bigger one, where you have consequences, alternatives, cumulative impacts, and mitigation actions. So public comment under NEPA. So there's been some questions on why I don't get to comment under NEPA, those type of things. So it really depends on the action that we're doing and how it applies to NEPA. So it does not anticipate any public comment under NEPA for the overlays, like I mentioned before. For the innovative ones, we really can't speak to that. I think the best avenue that we need to take is that the public needs to be engaged early on. They need to be engaged with the airport, with the roundtables, and make sure that if they have comments, concerns with the innovative development of the procedures, that it's addressed to the roundtable and to the airport. Because depending on the type of procedure and how it's designed and what it's doing and where it's going and all those things, there may not be a comment period under NEPA. So it's very important that you get involved early, honestly, before the procedures even make it to the FAA for their review. This is just, my understanding is we'll provide you these slides also at the end of the day or within the next couple days. This is kind of just a little flow chart that we've built for some of the other community engagement pieces that we've done. It just goes through and talks about how we look at things, what the steps are and those type of things. So in conclusion, I just want to reiterate the current GBAS procedures are overlays, both vertically and laterally, of the RNAV procedures. The environmental will be completed by the end of May is what we're hoping for. And again, we are not taking any comments. And with the innovative procedures, we need to stress that public engagement needs to happen early on. needs to be involved in the roundtable and the airport during the development stages. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn over to Paul.
Great, thanks, Joe. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just roll right into some of the additional information we'd like to present to folks here today. Hopefully everyone can see my screen as well. Can I just get confirmation on that?
Yes, there's an airport.
Yep, I got it, Paul.
Excellent, thank you. So I wanted to give just a little bit of history and then take a few moments to kind of lay out our plan that we would like to engage with the roundtable and the technical working group on. So first, just to dive into the history of the GBAS project, because I know we've got some new participants here with the roundtable and the TWG. We have actually been working on this GBAS project at San Francisco for a fair number of years at this point. It's hard for me to imagine because you know, we've been here since the start, but the opportunity for us to actually begin interfacing with members of the technical working group and the roundtable started potentially even as early as December of 2017, even earlier than that, for those folks that were involved in reviewing the information that came from the feasibility study that was done. And one of the main challenges that we've had, as Joe mentioned, this is a non-federal NAB aid, which means that all the actions that are undertaken here by the airport are done, you know, with participation from the FAA, but not any FAA funding, and you know, kind of with limited FAA oversight at this phase of our project. And what that means is that because this is an airport-funded, airport-driven project start to finish, there are certain challenges that we've encountered that have kind of served to slow us down a little bit from our original plan of attack. For those of you who have been working with us since the beginning of our GBAS endeavor, you may remember that we had intended for this GBAS to be operational in 2019. We had two significant problems that popped up. One of them was our negotiations between the airport, which is a City of San Francisco, obviously, entity, and Honeywell, which is a third-party company. That took us a little bit longer, I think, than we had anticipated and caused to extend out some of our anticipated timelines. We also had to kind of go through some learning process because this is the first public ground-based augmentation system designed for use here in the Western service area of the US. And there's a number of additional stakeholders we had to interface with. And of course, as many of us can't forget, we had this ongoing challenge with COVID-19, which again, you know, challenged, I think, a little bit about what the airport was able to do in terms of the funding levels and keeping a lot of energy going for the project in a challenging environment here. So in terms of the public engagements, you know, many of you, again, who have been working with us, who have gotten briefings from us, we have had a number of opportunities, I think, to speak with yourselves. We've had some chances to speak in the broader community, not only here in the Bay Area, but also internationally. So within the United States and in Europe at the International GBAS Working Group. But what that looks like here on this particular slide is we have had some good touch points with the roundtable, with the technical working group. But as you can see, there's a rather significant gap there between kind of the end of 2018, a little bit of a touch point in 2019, and then I think what you're probably experiencing now is our effort to try to re-engage with a lot of that outreach with this particular group. And so we've kind of represented that by these dots where we've either had an opportunity to give kind of a full update at the roundtable or come here to work with members of the technical working group. But as you can see in there, our Honeywell negotiation period and COVID-related delays have really shifted our timeline to the right. The good news is we're kind of past certainly the Honeywell negotiations. Those are now behind us. And so we're looking at a rather concrete timeline, in particular for that orange box right here related to the equipment installation and testing. That installation, as a matter of fact, is going on right now, this month of March, where the beginning of the civil site works is occurring there on the airport to start laying the foundations for the antennas. And obviously COVID has not fully resolved itself, but some of the challenges that the airport has been experiencing, we've been able to work through those. And that's part of what we'd like to discuss here today is our work plan and our commitment to continuing to work with the roundtable to get that feedback. One of the small pieces we wanted to touch on that I think Joe mentioned is that, you know, there are two aspects of this project. There's this construction aspect that I just mentioned. Again, we're breaking ground. There's persons and equipment out there starting to install the GBAS. And there are certain responsibilities from an environmental review perspective that the airport and the FAA have when it comes to the physical equipment. So there is the CEQA process, or the California Environmental Quality Act processes. And because this non-federal nav aid, which is owned by the airport, has a relatively small footprint, and it's all being installed on airport property. The airport's interactions with the ADO revealed that that would be a categorical exemption from the CEQA process specific to the navigational aid, the bits and pieces that we have to put into the ground. Because this is a non-federal nav aid, there is no federal NEPA action related to the actual installation of the object on the airport property. Looking at the flight procedures, as Joe just I think explained in much better detail than I could ever achieve, both the overlay flight procedures, which we need to commission and activate the system here for San Francisco, that involves a federal NEPA level analysis that is done by the FAA, because those flight procedures are intended for public use. And so they're following their normal kind of NEPA processes. And there is no equivalent CEQA responsibility for flight procedures, because these flight procedures are being developed by the FAA. So they're following their processes, and there really isn't much for us to do on the airport side other than provide any information we can to the FAA that might come up. As we look towards our innovative approaches, again, it's the same situation. And as Joe mentioned, this is where we want to make sure that we engage in as much outreach as possible before the FAA begins their formal process of developing any of the innovative procedures that we collectively believe are the best options to achieve our project goals. So just a little bit more insight on the project status. It has taken us a little while to get to this point. It's also taken us a fair amount of investment specifically from the airport. Again, these are not reimbursable dollars or anything like that. This is part of the airport's commitment to finding solutions to some of these noise challenges that have been experienced by the community. And that's taken us through a roughly $10 million up to this point for the airport outlay. There is a warranty that the airport also has to pay for, again, because this is not an FAA-owned nav aid. So the maintenance of the navigational aid falls to the airport as well, which basically constitutes about another $500,000 for the 5 years following the installation. As we kind of look forward to what we need to achieve here, we do, as Joe mentioned, expect the overlay approach procedures to be published on the 2nd of December. That is what's reflected in the gateway at the moment. Those procedures have to be in place, installed into the GBAS in order for the FAA flight inspection aircraft to come along and certify and commission our GBAS for use. If there are no procedures available at that time, we can't commission the device. So that's a critical deadline for us. And as Joe mentioned, the NEPA piece is ongoing. So we're waiting to see how that comes to completion here in the next few months. Relative to the innovative procedures, again, as Joe mentioned, this is an airport-led initiative. And as we've said for some time, even in our initial outreach back in 2018, our kind of limited outreach in the 19 and 20 period, and now our re-engagement, I think here, it is our endeavor to make sure that the airport project team works directly with the Roundtable participants and residents of the Bay Area to get feedback now before we make the request to the FAA, because we don't know for certain what level of public comment may be engaged later in the formal FAA NEPA process. So we want to lay out our roadmap to do that this year. However, just to kind of reiterate, that comes at the expense of the airport. It's additional costs that the airport has to bear, because this is not an FAA provided activity that we're all engaged in now. This is part of our ongoing project commitment. So what we see here on our estimated schedule, there's a lot of things going on, and I'm just going to very quickly kind of go through, I think, the most important aspect here, which is the dark blue area and some of the white boxes on the bottom. So we're here today kind of towards the very end of the first quarter of 2021. We are in a, what looks like a well-defined white box, which is our opportunity to evaluate innovative approaches. And I think many of you have heard this phrase. This is the process where we have come up with concepts of these innovative approaches that we want to share with residents of the Bay Area and our roundtables. This is also our opportunity for public feedback. While we show a definitive end, which is now kind of extending out into the third quarter, that really is a little bit of a flexible timeline, a little bit. a little bit. Our goal is to try to get as much feedback as we can wrapped up this year so that we can take the best candidates and ask for FAA development moving forward. However, if we're still struggling a little bit, there is some time I think that we can use. So I wouldn't fixate too hard on this line here in the end of the third quarter. But for those of you who have been tracking our desired timeline for getting this feedback, you'll see that it is shifting because we haven't yet had a full opportunity here. The other thing that we want to show here is that that engagement that we have here with the community, we would like to lay out our plan for how we can get that feedback. So what you see here, we're trying to use these kind of dots to indicate what we would like to do in terms of today, which is our technical working group presentation, along with our full roundtable presentations. And we would like to start into a very kind of regimented cadence of not only taking some of the time here during the technical working group to evaluate our innovative approaches, but also to make consistent updates at the full roundtable for the remainder of the year to achieve that feedback goal that we have here at the beginning. And then I think once we get to the point that we've made that request for innovative procedures to be developed, then perhaps the formality of the updates that we would like to share may change a bit, but certainly we want to make sure that members of our project team are available to the technical working group and the roundtable to answer questions and provide updates. Just a quick update on what we're talking about still for innovative approach procedures. We are still thinking about them. There are a number of them, actually. We've identified at this point 13 innovative approach concepts and even one departure concept. And we've divided them into two groups. And the groups are really based on when we think those procedures might be able to come into existence as FAA developed public procedures. And that's the key, because some of these innovative concepts require other pieces of FAA design criteria or aircraft technology or air traffic technology to be in place before the airport can publicly make the request for their development. We don't want to lose track of them, but we also don't want to spend a lot of time evaluating. I'm sorry, is there a quick question?
Paul, can we just better understand how many more slides we have, just because there's a full agenda, and I just want to better understand where we are with this, because we also have feedback on this and then other agenda items.
Understood. Two.
We only have 15 minutes to go. And
got it.
Can you clarify how many slides you have, please?
So, two, I think, is the answer.
Thank you.
So really quickly, I think, again, we still have this concept of trying to review our innovative approaches relative to the community flight procedure package. This is something that we're planning to deliver to participants here. And we would still like to get feedback on what ultimately should be included in those CFPPs. And then I think we've also got here at least one concept for how we believe we can use those community flight procedure packages, which represent the innovative approaches, to help us come to a good decision on what the best approaches should be at the end of this year for asking for FAA development. So I won't spend a lot of time here, but I can certainly come back to this slide because I want to make sure that we talk about the next step. So our goal here is we would like to come to the full roundtable to make another formal briefing on our GBAS engagement plan. We would like to get feedback about our community flight procedure package contents somewhere in the month of April and May, so that we can also distribute those CFPPs out to the technical working group in particular. And then we would like to start seeing if there's an opportunity to schedule these follow-up presentations and perhaps taking more of the precious time of the CWG to get that feedback before we make the FAA request. That's the last slide I had. Thank you.
okay, I just want to ask a couple of questions just to clarify. GBAS is a navigational aid that's designed, it is not designed to reduce noise. It is for efficiency and safety and for redundancy. I heard many times Mr. Bart say that the flights were not going to be any different than RNAV, but then I heard you say many times that there's innovative approaches, which tells me there are differences into what we're doing today. So could you square that out? Tell me.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, this is Joe. So what I was saying is the current proposed GBAS procedures are direct overlays of the RNAV procedures that you have into San Francisco. What Paul is talking about is in the future when we go to do innovative ones, they won't be direct overlays. They may be steeper glide slopes. It may be in a whole different area. It's just really, it's unknown right now. Right, they're being developed. They're going to be looked at. So what we're talking about today is the current proposed GBAS procedures or GLS procedures into San Francisco are current overlays of RNAV procedures.
Okay, but we're being asked to look at this innovative approaches, which will be different than the RNAV procedures, correct?
Correct. That'll be down the road. What we're talking about right now, though, is the ones that were the concerns at the roundtable last time was the overlays, and those are basically the RNAV procedure overlays.
Okay, it gets really confusing when I'm hearing one thing from one side and then the next time we're being asked to look at those. Now, and clarify for me, just for the members of the public, GBAS is not designed to reduce noise for approaching aircraft.
I don't know that it's designed for that. What we're saying is it may or may not provide noise relief. We just don't know right now.
Okay, in the past,
the current ones that are being implemented are overlays. So my understanding is they probably wouldn't change noise, reduce noise. It would be the same as it is today.
Okay,
Does
and
that help
again,
you?
okay, so back to some of the stuff that I've heard before was that some of these innovative approaches would create some relief because it would allow the airplanes to glide in at a more, I'm saying it in smoother path, so they wouldn't have to use the engines or the brakes. So please correct me if I'm mistaken that is one of the things that we were told in the past.
Mr. Chair, you're correct. So the direct overlays, it's just a direct overlay. We wouldn't expect any change from today. Where we would hope for the change is the innovative procedures coming in the future.
Okay. So that brings up a lot of other questions that I think I have to take them offline because again, just how the roundtable is going to be involved with this process. If there is no change in the flights, then there's really very little for us to say until these innovative approaches are actually being proposed. That's when I would see. So you know what, we're going to have a conversation about that because now I'm really confused.
No, I think you're right on. For the ones that are going in December, I think you're right on. There's really not much to comment on. They're just overlays of the RNAV. Where we're looking for your inputs and the community's inputs would be the innovative procedures moving forward.
Great. Okay, I appreciate that distinction because I guess it's important. Okay, I'm going to open it up to my counterparts. Any members of the roundtable that have any questions or comments? And we are running out of time, guys, so let's keep them short.
I do, Mr. Chair, very quickly, if I may.
Please.
So I thank you for the reports, both Mr. Hanna and Mr. Burt. What I've heard, I kind of heard it might not change noises on the overlay, or are we getting 100% commitment that noise level will not change for the overlay procedures?
It should not change at all. It should be the same as today.
Okay, and what I heard, Bert, that's for you from SFO in the past, that any innovative procedure that will be implemented with the GBAS will not be considered or will not be sent to the FAA if they will create more noise. Is that still the position of the SFO?
That's generally where we're standing, yeah.
So at what point would we, because what I know is once you send it to FAA, it's beyond our hands as far as public input. At what point would you come back to us for the innovative procedures to where we have full input from the SFO roundtable and the public before those get sent to FAA?
So maybe I can answer that. I think our goal, if we have good consensus on what information this group in particular would like to see in that community flight procedure package, which does include at a minimum our single event noise analysis that has been discussed in the past. We would prepare to send that out here in the month of April, May at the latest, if there are significant additional pieces that need to be included. And then we would spend the next regular scheduled sequence of technical working group meetings to review those CFPPs and get feedback on them.
And I think Paul's bringing up the core aspect of what we needed to cover during this meeting is what would be the content of the community flight procedures, that critical content, and agreement on that is what we would really need from today. Either that or bring it back to another meeting of the technical working group to better understand that, because that was a critical slide that we need to spend more time on.
Yeah, I
Right.
think if the roundtable is being asked to comment on this and to be involved in this process, we need to be crystal clear on what it is that we're commenting on. I'm clear as mud right now, so I would like to get some more clarification, but we can do that offline. And we are running out of time here, so I think we'll just have to get some more clarification, but I see what you mean, Michelle. Any other members that have any questions or comments? No? Okay, so we'll open it up to members of the public. Ms. Montes, could you check to see if we have anybody looking to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I do have 6 hands raised to speak, wishing to speak. I will.
And
Go
to the
ahead.
speakers, please keep it short because we are running out of time and we do have one additional agenda item. So I beg you to please keep them short.
Thank you, Chair. I will first call on Jennifer, followed by a phone caller ending in 836. So Jennifer, please accept this request to unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
Thank you. This is Jennifer Landesman from Palo Alto. I believe that the issue with the direct overlay is causing a tremendous amount of confusion because just because the ground track is supposedly the same, it does not mean that the noise will be the same. That is why I find it interesting that the SFO Roundtable is not even curious to see what the noise differences would be using the current FAA metric, even if it's for closer into the airport. So that ends in May. And the FAA's community engagement process was supposed to involve us on anything that is a precision-based navigation procedure. So basically the FAA is not only confusing all of you right now, but they are reneging on everything that they have told us for the last 3 years that they would do in order to involve the communities. So it's all for show. This is really, I mean, the idea that trust, that nobody understands that trust is broken at this point. And to Kathleen's point earlier, which is how to speak with the FAA, well, you know, having proper environmental assessments would be a really great way to speak with the FAA, because if you look at the 3rd item, which is for a full EIS, that's when you actually connect the dots between what we care about and what the FAA is doing. So I really think that, you know, lucky you get to talk about what you're going to do with the FAA, and you're leaving communities that stand to be affected completely in the dark, and your own communities as well. So I just don't know how you do that, having done this already with so many other procedures and with NextGen 1.0. So I do think it should not be, you know, as muddy as it is right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Landesman. I will now call on our caller ending 836. So please accept this request to unmute your microphone and begin speaking. Hi, caller ending in 836. You will have to, there you go. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Mark Shaw, Palo Alto. Director Sotero has said that the airport will coordinate with communities before it invests and implements the GBAS landing system, but it's becoming yet another cram down over Palo Alto and East Palo Alto in the enhancements, just like the pirate cram down, all under the same false assertion that is merely an overlay. Presenting vague marketing pitches is not a technical coordination, particularly when they're nearly void of meaningful and readable technical detail. Coordination should mean direct meetings with the communities actually involved. And it's particularly galling to see in the previous presentation that all traffic shifts the roundtable previously imposed on us, pirate, side-by, and new surfer, are now put under lock and key. Coordination should include answering the written questions we submitted, which SFO has not. And if you look at surfer, Palo Alto's noise problems are twofold. First, from the increased concentration, i.e. the rail, which the overlays shift from vectors to RNP will further exacerbate. And second, from the late decelerations due to over energy at eddy, air brakes, excess flaps, etc. Not only will RNP make this worse, but the noise model completely ignores this primary noise generator by specifically excluding, quote, aerodynamic deceleration devices in its calculations. If excess late deceleration of the surface structure is not included, the model is propaganda, not science. The presentation lightly mentions that the localizer directional aid is going away. Separately, we know that new .308 procedures are being implemented. An industry white paper describes a huge shift to vertical separation in SFO. These will eliminate the Foster City offset and lock in low approaches over the peninsula for our lifetime, even with the enhanced implementations. And what does it mean if, quote, down the bay and other enhancements can't be used during closely spaced parallel operations,
Okay.
which is SFO's normal mode?
Your
Can you hear
time
me?
is up. We are running really low on time, so I want to make sure we get in the other comments.
Yeah, I would just say that, lastly, for the FAA, the people who are under this are not even on the roundtable. So that needs to be addressed. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Scholl. I will now call on Mary Jo Fremont, followed by Lydia Cruz. So Mary Jo, please accept this request on your microphone and begin speaking.
Marie-Jo Fremont from Palo Alto. Given that topic 1 was combined with topic 2 on the agenda for public comments, I'm going to touch upon the procedures. Nighttime arrivals must also be a priority. The San Francisco Roundtable issued recommendations in November 2016. They were very good. It was assigned Bodega East arrivals to the east side of the bay, to the east downwind leg, have the oceanic arrivals fly over the water as much as possible, and have surfer/Big Sur arrive from the east side of the bay. So I would ask this technical working group to resurrect these recommendations because they're still valid and they were well thought. And in addition, the technical working group can leverage the work that the Santa Clara, Santa Cruz Roundtable, now no longer meeting, has been doing with the FAA in asking questions about, for instance, the usage of Bodega East, the east leg. So please keep that on your radar screen. The second topic on GBAS, I will reiterate again what other speakers have said right before me. Many of the communities who are going to be affected by GBAS have zero representation. We don't even get a meeting. We have no elected official who can even speak about this. And I've said that before. I cannot understand how this body can really provide feedback because you really will not be affected for many of you. And that is just, for me, I do not understand in what democracy we live in anymore in the US. I am a US citizen, I'm a French citizen. I think I'm ready to give up my US citizenship. There is no representation, and this has been going on for 3 years on GBAS. So commitment from the FAA, I would say the only insurance we have is measure, SFO, you should measure the noise before the GBAS overlay and after the GBAS overlay. That will be the proof. And if it doesn't work, then it's off.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to go on to the next speaker. Thank you, Mary Jo. Angela, we'll go to the next speaker.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now call on Lydia Koo, followed by Rob Holbrook. So Ms. Koo, please accept this request on your microphone and begin speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Lydia Koo, City Council Member, City of Palo Alto. The Santa Clara Santa Cruz Roundtable is currently suspended. Therefore, the SCSC Roundtable cannot host the planned discussion on GBAS with SFO. Someone must host a GBAS community meeting for residents and elected officials in Santa Clara and Santa Cruz counties, where San Francisco, where SFO would present the latest update, answer questions previously submitted, and new questions from meeting attendees. Palo Alto would be happy to host with invitations to multiple cities to attend, as we did in the fall of 2018. The sooner the better. We would love to hear something and set up something within the next 60 days. And please let me know how to proceed. My city manager is ready to talk to the airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Koo. And I would encourage you to reach out to the airport. I think we do have some representatives here. So with that, Angela, we could go move on to the next speaker.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now call on Rob Holbrook. Please press your microphone and begin speaking.
Thank you, Robert Holbrook, Mountain View. 5 quick points. First, regarding night hush. Speed really matters. If the FAA wants to shortcut the Select Committee's recommendation regarding early turns to gobs, I think they owe the Roundtable an analysis of the noise impact of the early turns versus the noise impact of the committee's recommendation versus the early turns. That purple area should be broken out into estimates of how much noise people under various regions in that area are expected to receive. Second, GBAS. The statement's been made it's not designed for noise. And while that's probably true, I would point out that I found an FAA document that cited a study of GBAS at SFO that showed a great reduction in sound energy, like 85%. I've written to try and get more information about this. I have great doubts about it, I must say, but it's tantalizing and it's frustrating not knowing more about what was found in that study. Third, the FAA needs to up its game regarding CADXs. CADXs are not appropriate under NEPA if a decision is expected to be highly controversial. The neighborhood environmental study I commented on in my first comment calls all the FAA screens into questions with regard to this regard. Fourth, GBAS overlay. How airplanes fly is not the same as where they are flying. So we should ask a couple more questions, even regard to the overlays. Do they enable more planes to land? Will it lead to more use of flight management systems? My own suspicion is that flight management systems have increased noise. Finally, we've been told that AEDT-4 is expected to do a better job of incorporating airframe noise than AEDT-3 does, which is used for modeling. And that's about half of the arrival noise based on my studies. So I'm a little skeptical about how the
I'm going to have to stop you there. Mr. Holbrook, I'm going to have to stop you there. We are out of time. I'm only going to allow the next two speakers and none others. We are way past our end time. So I'm going to give you those two speakers an opportunity, then we're going to have to wrap it up. So thank you. Please keep it short. We do need to get people back to work.
Thank you, Chairman. I will call, I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce your name, so I will call on A, followed by Darlene Yapley. So please accept this request, in your microphone and begin speaking. Hello, can you hear us?
Let's go to Ms.
Yapley.
Let's go to Ms. Yapley and then she can come in afterwards. Angela.
Oh, yes, 1 second. So I will now call on Darlene Yapley. And I just want to note, Mr. Peter Grace, your hand came in a little late, and we will not be able to call on you.
Sorry, it's already 1:35. We need to wrap it up. So I apologize. I'm not going to allow any more public comment.
People can submit their comments, written comment, however, if they wanted to submit through the website or to Angela directly.
For GBAS, I want to underscore that using the same ground track does not mean the same noise. We all know that more planes are going to fly on these procedures, so that already is a no-brainer. There's more noise. Second, questions on GBAS innovative approaches were submitted through both the San Francisco Roundtable, which is an email to Bert on November 24th, and the SCSC Roundtable emailed to Bert prior to the January 21st SFO Roundtable meeting. Can we expect answers to these questions? If so, when? I support Palo Alto Council members Ku's request to host a GBAS meeting that will be open and invite multiple cities, given that the Santa Cruz Santa Clara Roundtable is suspended. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yapley. Appreciate you keeping it short. And then that last speaker that we had that was standing by, and Mr. Grace, I appreciate it if you could just give us a written comment. I do need to, we're already 10 minutes beyond our end time, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I believe they have unmuted their microphone, so please, thank you. Hello, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, you might be having audio issues, so I will say, Chair, if you would like, they can submit a
Yeah,
written
please.
comment to
Yeah,
us.
if you
to
can
not-
submit the comments in writing, that would be great. Michelle, we still had item number 5. I think we'll just table that for our next working group.
Yes, thank you.
And then with that, I just wanted to thank everybody. Do we need to do anything else before we close?
I would say recommend a meeting with Bert and maybe his boss to debrief on the meeting and discuss about next steps.
Right, we had one before, so I just need some clarification as a follow-up to that one. And then we can present some of the clarifying items at our next technical working group. With that, we're way past our end time. So thank you very much, everybody, for participating. Thank you for all the speakers, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.